Let's bring in our White House correspondent Elizabeth Schulze, also former CIA operations officer Daryl Blocker. And Daryl will talk about what they didn't talk about in a second. That's your expertise. But Elizabeth, I'll take it over to you. I know business is one of your specialties, but I'll let you decide where you want to begin. They hit a number of important international topics, clearly.
A couple of big headlines there, Kira. Ultimately, a lot of this effort to stand side by side was to show the commitment when it comes to deterring the nuclear threat from North Korea. And we heard the president dismiss concerns that recent legislation that's passed here, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, that could put allies like South Korea at risk. Ultimately, he said that those are more aimed at countering the threat from China, and that this conversation that he's had today here at the Oval Office with the president of South Korea showed that they are on the same page on that front. Now, obviously, behind closed doors, we don't know how much of that conversation was relayed. I have to mention the big headline when it comes to the president's domestic priorities here. Obviously, Kira, the president talking about his choice to run for re-election. He answered a question from our Mary Bruce saying that he's ready to go. And when we asked him if he knows if this was related, this decision was factored by the decision by former President Trump to run, President Biden said, "I know him well, and I know the danger he presents to democracy." He continued to use that line, "I've got a job to finish." And then he did pivot that into talking about how he has a clear role to continue playing on the international stage here, one that we are seeing play out today at the White House throughout this state visit. The president says there was a leadership void during the previous administration. His job is to make sure that the U.S. is a leader on the global stage, whether it comes to the threat from North Korea, the ongoing threat from China, or the continued commitment from the U.S. and its allies in the war in Ukraine, Kira.
Yeah, our Mary Bruce definitely, Elizabeth, there dominated the questions, because that is what everybody has been asking, is about the president's age. He's 81 years old. He's going to be well into the deep 80s if indeed he wins the presidency again. There's been concern about his health, and then also there's these low poll numbers. And it's interesting, the South Korean president also at the moment suffering from low poll numbers as well. So they've kind of come together, it looks like, to sort of find a camaraderie in a number of things, including both of their predecessors dealing with indictments. You tend to wonder if there's a little behind-the-scenes talk on maybe the South Korean president trying to give President Biden a little bit of boost here, that he should keep pushing forward to make a difference and possibly, be able to put Trump in his place. But, that's the big question out there right now.
Sure, and the way that the president responded to Mary's question about his age was to say that he thinks his polling numbers are strong. He said, if you look at the approval, if you look at what I've done, check my record, and Americans approve. This is something that the president has made clear, that he is running on some of those big legislative victories he sees that he got through, including some bipartisan legislation like the bipartisan infrastructure law. The president trying to make the case his approval ratings, he says, are where a lot of other presidents have been when they've announced they're running again. But when you look at the policies that he's passed, he said that's what Americans want. And in fact, trying to draw the contrast clearly with what Republicans have been proposing. And you mentioned at the end there, Carrie, couldn't resist an effort to kind of jab Republicans for failing to agree with him on a clean debt limit, raising the debt limit in a clean way. Basically, Republicans want these budget cuts in order to raise the debt ceiling. The president there saying it would be reckless not to raise the debt ceiling. And this is something that he's kind of standing firm on his position. He doesn't want to negotiate on those possible spending cuts. Hard to see how this is going to resolve itself as he sort of digs in, and Republicans continue to dig in too, Kira.
All right, Daryl, now to your specialty as our contributor and former CIA operative, what they didn't talk about, and there was a question about the Pentagon leak and the ongoing investigation and the threat of spying. I guess this is your expertise. What did they not talk about, but did you get any kind of understanding that they are sort of working behind the scenes to deal with that threat?
So I'm always interested in what someone is not saying, and clearly they're not going to air their dirty laundry in front of the world. But trust me, that was a topic of discussion and probably was very high on the list, if for no other reason to discuss it and get out of the way so that they could get down to more substantive issues, as in deterring a nuclear threat from their neighbors to the north.
Why don't we move over into other things that they were talking about with regard to the agreement they're making, these two leaders. We talked about North Korea. We talked about, actually, we didn't talk about the semiconductors. You touched a little bit on it, Elizabeth, but maybe we can delve a little bit more into that. And then the president reassuring that there's not going to be an issue with the supply chain, that jobs are going to be created, and that the relationship between South Korea and the United States will make all of those things much stronger and free-flowing.
Well, Kira, this is a really fine line that the president is trying to walk when it comes to his push to have U.S. manufacturing, emphasize the importance of U.S. manufacturing. And this is at the expense potentially of some allies. And we've seen that when it comes to subsidies for other countries, that's a sticking point. But he was defending that legislation.
All right, I think we are connected to Mary now. All right, Mary, just take it from the very beginning. let's rewind. There we go. We got you.
Let's give this another shot. Yes, we know that age is a factor when we look at that polling. The 70% of Americans who have said that, and a majority of Democratic voters who say that they don't think the president should be running again. They would like to see an alternative candidate. The president has been very frank in saying he knows and he thinks that his issue, can be discussed, certainly can be raised as an issue. But he's always said, just watch me, right? That's his answer. Today, he said that he did take a hard look at it, that was, considered, of course, when he was making this decision of whether to seek re-election, but that ultimately he decided that he is the best person to continue this fight, because that is how they are framing this re-election campaign. You'll recall 4 years ago, he framed this as a battle for the soul of this nation, and the president is arguing that that fight continues. And then we asked, of course, now what role does Donald Trump play in all of this? Because the president has long said, look, he beat him once, he thinks he can beat him again, but he also made clear that while Donald Trump, I think it's undeniable, was a factor, he, of course, wasn't the only factor. And the president says, yes, he would be running again with or without Donald Trump.
All right, Mary, here's the exchange.
You recently launched your re-election campaign. You've said questions about your age are legitimate. And your response is always, just watch me. But the country is watching. And recent polling shows that 70% of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, believe you shouldn't run again. What do you say to them? What do you say to those Americans who are watching and aren't convinced? You've said you can beat Trump again. Do you think you're the only one?
I may not be the only one, but I know him well, and I know the danger he presents to our democracy. And we've been down this road before. And so things are moving. And the reason I'm running again is there's a job to finish. And with regard to age, I can't even say, I guess how old I am, I can't even say the number. It doesn't register with me. And but the only thing I can say is that one of the things that people are going to find out, they're going to see a race, and they're going to judge whether or not I have it or don't have it.
The president, Elizabeth, saying he's not underwater. He's going to keep moving forward.
Kira, absolutely right. The president defending his current poll numbers and saying that he is the best person for this job, saying he thought about the decision to run again. This is what's happening. And he said that ultimately he has work that he wants to finish. We've heard this slogan, finish the job. It's one we're going to hear a lot over the next year and a half as this campaign ramps up. And that's something the president will continue to emphasize as he does try to continue to his job in the form of state visits every day or other types of ceremonies, the typical business as usual here at the White House, Kira.
All right, Elizabeth Schulze, Darrell Blocker, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.